Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here today on our Total Wellness Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about lectins. Yes, we've talked about lectins before in the past, but what I want to do is give you some specific recommendations for those people currently dealing with lectin-based sensitivity. Now, I'm not going to go through all the ins and outs of lectins here today. It is something important that you start to learn more about if you do have autoimmune issues, skin issues, headaches, migraines, and any type of gut-based disorder. Now, what I want to share with you, again, I'm going to link this up here today. So you can find the previous shows on lectins at stephencabral.com/2419. That's today's episode. The 3 big takeaways are going to be on that show notes page, and also previous podcasts as to whether this whole thing about lectin sensitivity is way blown out of proportion or not. Now, again, you know, hopefully you've been listening to the podcast for a while. You know that I certainly do not believe in staying away from fruits and vegetables. Now, I do think that some fruits and vegetables cause some people some sensitivity, and some of those fruits and vegetables happen to be eating unripe fruit or foods higher in lectins. But the problem is that even, and again, I'm not going to mention any authors' names, even those people in the health-based field who write books on lectins and staying away from lectins, if you talk with them in person and you really speak with them about it, they all say, well, it's because of gut-based imbalances and disorders. Okay, so is lectin sensitivity a real thing? The answer is yes, it is. But does that mean that you should just then stay away from high lectin foods the rest of your life? Well, you know, if you're a conventional medicine believer, well, then yes, because basically it's a prescription, right? It's a Band-Aid approach. I'm just going to stay away from the foods that cause me gas, bloating, joint pain, etc. And while I do agree that in the beginning you should, because you don't want any of those issues, it's showing you a symptom. You should be able to eat fruits and vegetables without going into an all-out autoimmune-based imbalance. Again, I had this in the past, so I totally understand it. Mine was definitely with rheumatoid arthritis. It affected my thumbs and elbow joints. It caused all sorts of allergies in my body and gut-based sensitivities and pain. So I get it. I've been there. I understand. I'm not there anymore. And that's because I had a mentor that was able to share with me as well that these are always symptoms, that you are given these foods in nature to be able to eat and enjoy. And yes, you're always going to have your own innate sensitivities, but that doesn't include every single fruit and vegetable, basically. So what I want to do here today is always understand that if you have a lectin sensitivity, a salicylate sensitivity, you have a oxalate sensitivity, of any of these sensitivities, understand that there's an underlying imbalance that's allowing for this greater fruition of this particular symptom or problem. And it could be magnesium and vitamin B6, or even vitamin C for something like an oxalate issue. It can be candida overgrowth, it can be SIBO, it can be parasites, it can be H. pylori for a lot of these other issues. I recommend testing and finding out what it is that's causing these underlying root imbalances. That's my truth. That's what I believe. And that's because people struggle for years trying to figure out what it is when they could run an at-home lab tests with their integrative health practitioner level 2, with their naturopathic doctor, or with our team at Equilife. It's, again, you can choose whoever you want to work with, but that's really how you figure out what's going on with your gut and causing all these different sensitivities. All right, so fix your digestive system, fix your Th2 dominant immune system, or even Th1 with a lot of the autoimmune issues. And so again, I want to help you with that. That's not today's podcast. Today's podcast says, okay, you know you're dealing with the lectin sensitivity. You know that it causes histamine, mast cell, or IgE, IgG mediated responses. So what do we do? Okay, well, in the beginning, sure, we'll eliminate or choose lower lectin nuts, because we're basically talking about nuts, beans, seeds. That's what we want to talk about here today. And the reason is that a lot of the fats that you may be eating or oils could come from higher lectin-based foods. And so again, we're going to make this super simple here today. We're not talking about the fruits and veggies so much because, well, hopefully those aren't being turned into oils. You don't want to eat a lot of vegetable oils, that's for sure. And you definitely don't want to eat heated vegetable oils. However, we're going to talk about some of the nuts and seeds. I have a previous podcast that I also want to link up on the very best oil you can use out there for cooking. And it was a bit of a surprise as well. It's it's one of my favorites, of course. Again, just based on the research. But after I read this research and I went super deep, I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty much the best of the best. And so again, I'll link up that podcast as well at stephencabral.com/2419. All right, let's dive into it. What are some of the higher lectin nuts that right away, when you hear these are the ones that you're going to want to stay away from for your other oils and your cooking and your added fats, right? Or even nut butters. All right, let's stay away from the almonds, a lot of the cashews, some of the hazelnuts, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, okay? Because those can be higher in lectins. All right. Hazelnuts I've heard before. Hazelnuts I mentioned. Pine nuts go back and forth. I think pine nuts are completely fine. I've never seen anybody have issues with pine nuts. I also don't know too many people that are eating pine nuts in too high a quantity, except if you're someone like me or in my household where my wife makes a delicious pesto out of pine nuts. But let's say that you, right, again, there is this thing called bioindividuality, and you may or may not have an issue with pine nuts. Could go either way. What I found is that if you know, like you've tried this, okay, you tried it once, you got itchy eyes, you got a little brain fog, you got some digestive pain, whatever it might be. And if that was the only new variable, and again, you can listen to my show on rotation diets that we'll try to link up because you can figure these things out. All right, then we remove it. But if it was okay and you then try it maybe 3 days later and it was okay, it's probably okay for you, right? So let's look at that. And sometimes the last thing I want to add is this. It's oftentimes the quantity that makes the biggest difference. You can have a small amount, a tablespoon, over a salad or something like that, but you can't do 3 tablespoons, right? Like it can be a quantity base. But anyway, when my wife is making a delicious pesto, she uses pine nuts, but you may use something else. And I'm going to share with you some of the nuts that are lower in lectins. I'm going to give you a couple different lists here, okay? So macadamia nuts, those are also one of my favorite. Again, they're on the fence for many people. I found that macadamia nuts are very well tolerated by many, many people. And you could make a mac nut pesto, and that's actually pretty nice. And also seems to work well for a lot of people too, for a nut milk. So and think about kind of getting rid of the almond milk or even cashew milk and replacing that maybe with some macadamia nut milk. A lot of people use coconut milk as well. Coconut milk, coconut oil seems to be totally fine. So there's another one. What else do I want to share with you? Pecans. Pecans are hit or miss. You know, you can't use those as an easy one-for-one substitute, and certainly you wouldn't use it as a pecan oil, but pecan nut butter, a raw pecan nut butter could be really nice for a lot of people. Pistachio nut butter, if you've never tried that before, it's absolutely delicious. So that could be fine. I found with pistachio nuts, you have to be a little bit careful. Those are ones that can grow a little bit of mold in them. So if you can find a company that does do mold testing, that's actually best, just because you have to be careful with those, all right? And never get the pistachio nuts that are dyed red or dyed a certain color, okay? They should be green. All right, walnuts. Walnuts can be great. Not everybody loves the taste of walnuts, but it can actually make a really nice nut butter if you're looking to make a nut butter. My recommendation is to make your own nut butters, use it within that week. There is oxidation that takes place. However, of course, I know it's so much easier to purchase one. And if you're going to do that, of course, then just look for a ideally raw, cold process one, a small jar so that you can use it up quickly, keep it capped tight, and keep it out of the light as well. All right, flax seeds. One of my favorites, just because of so many benefits. Again, flax seeds are best kept. Well, you don't really, honestly, I've looked into the research on this. I don't think that I'd use it too much as an oil, except in a small bottle, and I'd use it pretty quickly. I don't think that the whole refrigeration thing is really as needed as it needs to be. It just has to be in a light, safe bottle is what I found from the research. So that's important. But flax can be a really great thing for overall omegas, especially if you're on a vegan or plant-based diet. Hemp is absolutely one of my favorites. Hemp oil, hemp seeds. You know, I use hemp hearts, which is basically the seed that's been sprouted is not the right term, but popped, right? So it's easier to digest, so you don't have that outside kernel. That's my favorite way to get hemp in there. Pumpkin seeds are a really nice one. That can be great as well for zinc and for iron for some people. And then there's chia seeds as well. So a lot of times when we're making our own products, formulating products, we're using flax. We're often using chia because it's really nice for water absorption as well. Plus flax and chia are high in omega. So we really like those. And you get your 3, 6s, and 9s there in a healthy ratio. And the other one that I like to use is psyllium. Psyllium you're not going to get as an oil but it's used in a lot of products as well, and that can be really nice. So those are super healthy. Some other ones out there, coconut cream without the carrageenan can be quite healthy as a healthier fat. Again, it just depends on you how you do with saturated fats. If you break them down well, then great. What else do I like to recommend? Brazil nuts. So Brazil nuts can be low in lectins, and they can be great. I've given you in my Thyroid Health Results Accelerator course, that's at stephencabral.com/courses on how to rebalance your thyroid, literally A to Z. I give you a thyroid-based smoothie, and you can use that Brazil nut in there. Just one a day is honestly all you need. That's totally fine. Or even one every other day or two every other day, totally fine. You get your selenium in with that too. All right, let me give you a couple others that I like and that I recommend. These are mainly oil-based. So you know that my highest recommendation is that you really don't use oils with cooking. I know that a lot of people love to use oils for cooking because it kind of soaks in that flavor to the food. I'm telling you right now, all oils become oxidized to some variation. And I know people say, well, at this, it's only oxidizes at 400 something degrees. Well, that's when it oxidizes at its highest level. There is some oxidation taking place. Let's just, be honest here. So the truth is, use as little as oil as possible when cooking, and the best oils to use are going to be your saturated ones, or olive oil, or even avocado oil. All right, but I have a whole podcast on those, and I think you'll be shocked at the winner as well because it's not a saturated. All right. So there are other ones that you can cook with, and that would be grass-fed butter or ghee. So those are lower in lectins. They're basically lectin-free. I mean, they really are, right? Because it's dairy-based product. And so that's a great one that you can start to use. In Ayurveda, they use a whole lot more ghee. I typically don't choose cow-based products for the most part. I'm always using goat or sheep-based dairy products if I'm using them with myself or my daughters or in my practice. And that's because there's so much less allergen, IgG reactivity. If you're using cow's milk, anything in your diet, I just recommend running an IgG food sensitivity test because it's the #1 IgG food sensitivity, which means it doesn't cause bloating or gas and those types of things. What it does, it causes the skin issues, histamines, reactions, joint pain, brain fog, etc. the next day or the day after. All right. So definitely check that out. I think it's important and worth looking into. Olive oil I've talked about, perfectly acceptable on a low lectin diet. Coconut oil, macadamia nut oil, because again, now we're just even getting rid of the whole nut itself and we're pressing it, getting the oil out of it. MCT oil though is coming from typically coconuts. It's usually coconut derived, the medium chain triglycerides. I used to use that back in the day when I was doing my natural bodybuilding, not so much anymore. Avocado oil, I've mentioned that before. Avocado mayo even is very, very popular. And if you get a clean brand, that can be a really good substitute for that cheaper, more toxic canola oil or soy oil based brands, which are not okay. I think one that you're going to start to see popping up a bit more, we're doing some formulation and some experimenting with this. It's not where we want it to be yet, so we're not going to put it out there because it's just not as great as we want it to be. But that's perilla oil or even algae oil for a vegan-based omega-3. We need to get it to the point where it's not going to be oxidized and that it's going to be even healthier. So just be really careful with those ones. They oxidize at a much faster rate, but at least worth looking into. One that I never recommend heating or cooking with would be walnut oil and maybe even sesame oil as well, but they can be a really nice addition cold processed. So cold processed sesame oil has been used for oil pulling in the mouth or for the hair, the scalp, or even on top of food for thousands of years in Ayurvedic-based medicine. And I think it can be a totally healthy and good addition to your diet. It is a little higher in copper. So if you're low in copper, great. If you're higher in copper, well, you probably won't use that one, right? Or you'll just use it topically. But it's one to look into as well. You just don't want to heat it, right? That's it. Or very, very low. You don't want to heat that one. And the last one is a fish oil. So if you're using fish oil or cod liver oil or one of those are obviously healthy fats. I would obviously never cook with a fish oil, but certainly as a nutritional supplement, that is a healthy fat that can be totally fine. So hopefully I gave you a nice little list of your lower lectin nuts and seeds. You kind of call them lower lectin because as long as there is the nut and seed, it's always going to have a little bit of lectins there. However, once we break it down and we press it into that oil, which yes, it is a more processed form because we're also processing out the actual nut and seed. We're just extracting. Anything that's extracted is processed, right? Doesn't mean it's bad. It just It means it's processed. It's okay. Again, it's totally fine, but just keep in mind, that's how we get rid of a lot of those lectins as well. I'm not going to get into pressure cooking or any of those things today. I don't think you should ever do that with a lot of these oils or fats, because again, it can create more oxidation. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, let me know if there's any other topics that you would like me to chat about in terms of gut sensitivities. We've got lots and lots of shows, but that does not mean that I'm not happy to do a part 2 or answer any additional questions, because that is where a lot of the Cabral concept topics come from. Thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully this was helpful. We're going to link up the previous podcasts that go more in depth on lectin sensitivities and how to fix them at stephencabral.com/2419. All right, take care, everyone. I'll talk with you tomorrow.